My father was like the most practical white guy ever. He used to say to me and my mom, who loved spirituality and everything having to do with spirit and paranormal, he used to say, Sabrina, don't be afraid of the dead ones. It's the live ones that are going to get you.
For centuries, spiritual wisdom has been passed down from the mountaintop, from the guru, the priest, the charismatic teacher who claimed to have all the answers. But what if the answers were never meant to come from one person alone? What if wisdom was always meant to be something that we built together? In a time of uncertainty when old leadership models are breaking down, a new kind of spiritual guidance is emerging, one that isn't about mastery and isolation, but really about the wisdom shared in community. So the question isn't just who is the teacher, it's how do we all participate in wisdom building? Your journey to the divine is an intimate exploration of self, where you are both the seeker and the source of enlightenment. I, Jessica Paschke, invite you to break free from the ordinary, to reforge your spiritual path with courage, curiosity, and audacity. Unleash the power of your spiritual connection, stepping into a purpose-driven life free of have-tos and shoulds. Join me on this profound exploration of rediscovery, where you'll not only redefine your own spiritual practice, but also inspire a collective awakening. Welcome to Reclaiming Our Spirit. Welcome back to Reclaiming Our Spirit. We are diving into more of the Hermit and this idea that we're shifting from the Hermit as a seeker, a guru on the mountain, to this idea of the sun and that joy of shared insight. And with me today is Sabrina Marie Chase, who has been thinking a lot about how spirit workers in 2025 can evolve past that idea of a solo journey and into something much greater together. So welcome. I'm so excited you're here.
I'm delighted beyond measure, especially to talk with someone else who's geeky and wonderful with tarot. So let's go.
Let's do this. We met actually when I was guesting on her podcast, and we hit it off right away because tarot is our shared love language. And
Yeah.
so this was like a no-brainer for me to have you on. I'm as excited as you to geek out with the tarot right now. Before we jump in though, can you just tell us a little bit about you and like what your work is rooted in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I am a biracial, bicultural person. My mother was born in San Jose, Costa Rica, and my dad was born in Western Kansas. So I grew up in a household that was really interesting and diverse. My father was like the most practical white guy ever. He used to say to me and my mom, who loved spirituality and everything having to do with spirit and paranormal, he used to say, Sabrina, don't be afraid of the dead ones. It's the live ones that are going to get you.
That's so true.
Yeah. But my mom came with this huge spiritual background. Her family, my family on her side, is very spiritually oriented with esoteric practitioners. Both of them were educators, even my grandmother. And at that time in Latin America, that was really unusual for a woman to be so educated. So I grew up in this house with magical realism, folk magical practices that my mom just engaged in from her childhood. And I saw my first tarot reading when I was 5 or 6.
Really? I love that.
I did. And my mother was in graduate school at that time, and she brought over a friend and colleague, Victor from Mexico, and he did a full tarot reading. And I was a little kid and I didn't understand what was happening, but I was utterly fascinated. And that never left me. And so when I was in high school in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I was looking through a bookstore that was near the university, and I found my first deck of tarot cards, and they were the Marseille deck, the French woodcuts deck. And I actually didn't think they were very pretty, but something in me said, you have to buy them. And I did with some of my own little money. And then that started a lifelong, passionate relationship with tarot. I have been more faithful to tarot than I have been to any other relationship in my life. And that was like over 40 years ago. And I just threw myself into it. I didn't really have teachers. I had like one book that I checked out of the university library. Why the university library had Z Budapest's Book of Women Mysteries Part 2, I do not know, but there was a chapter on tarot. And mostly I taught myself over the years by obsessively doing readings, taking notes, and comparing what happened in my life and the life of my friends I read for. Over the last 40 years, I've ended up developing my own system that's rooted in that sort of bicultural magical realism. And today I consider myself a diviner.
I
And
love that. So, how do you define diviner?
okay, a diviner is a skilled practitioner whose primary goal is to help their person, their questioner, to align themselves better with spirit and their highest good. And what that means is they've got probably years, maybe even decades of experience. And instead of sitting there thinking, what exactly does this card mean and how do I do this? That's second nature. They have those as the foundation. What they're doing is they're saying, how can I use all of my skills and knowledge, everything, my expertise in tarot, but also my expertise in facilitation, in whatever tradition I'm trained in, shamanism, Buddhism, coaching. How can I bring those things to the table to help the human being in front of me align better with spirit and their highest good or highest self so that they can listen to this work we're going to do together, this deep dive into their life I'm going to do with tarot, and work with me to find the pivot points in their future of least resistance where they can shift and choose something different that's more aligned with their true mission and their true path.
See, I love that. That is how I work with tarot as well. It's this tool for evolution and growth. And rather than, locking us into a set system, it should allow us to expand and become more of who we are. From the moment we started chatting, I knew, y'all, I knew. So we actually were having a phone conversation and we started chatting about the Hermit being the card for the year. I don't even know how we got onto the. What really came out in the conversation was this idea that, the Hermit, and we talked about this in the previous episode where, the visual, the illustrations is typically posed on a mountain by themselves with a staff and a light. And they are going off on like this lone journey into the cave to the mountaintop. They're removing themselves from everything around them to find the quiet, to get the downloads, right? To get that spiritual thing. But this idea of like the traditional guru model doesn't really work anymore, does it? It's not jiving with where we are in this moment. And I'm like wondering, in our conversation, we were talking about how the guru actually needs to be able to not be a guru anymore. It needs to evolve and needs to be in community rather than by themselves. So rather than that spiritual knowledge coming from solitude and mastery or this hierarchy or this singular authority or this source of truth, it actually needs to evolve. Do you want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the Hermit? Because
Absolutely.
it's so required right now in this moment.
Absolutely. And I also want to point out that you talked in the last episode about the Wheel of Fortune, which is really prescient because the coming together of the Hermit in the time with the Wheel of Fortune brings us to now. And I know we'll talk about that more later. But first, I wanted to say the Hermit is an incredibly important card. And I specialize in these 90-minute, 2-hour recorded deep dives with people. And when the Hermit comes up, very often my clients are like, this might be a little scary. Less so now because I read for so many change agents. The majority of my practice now is spiritual practitioners and leaders and change agents. So less now than ever. But the Hermit really talks about looking within and doing a deep and searching inventory of self. And also, when the Hermit looks out in the world, often they look in, what can I do? What can I learn externally to support what I am learning about myself by looking within? So, Hermit periods in people's lives, they end up doing research into therapies, research, and they might figure out about their attachment style and relationships. They look to soak up those pieces that can help them understand themselves and grow in wisdom. And it can feel kind of lonely. It
Mm.
does often begin in a way that's kind of isolated. And that's built into the first part of this. So sometimes I'll work with people and they'll be like, I don't want to be doing work alone, looking at myself. I want to be with people, which is very understandable. And I think that in its first stages, the hermit is all inward looking and looking for support resources. But then that hermit needs to grow and turn their eyes outward. And what we are being asked to do, I believe, in this particular moment in time, which is all about the turning wheel of change, is to begin to come together with all of this wisdom, with this capacity to go within and this capacity to draw on resources to help us understand more deeply and begin exchanging teachings and wisdom and intuitions with each other. That's really important. And that's how we started talking about how can the hermit come together with the sun, which is very much about harmonious community, harmonious communication amongst different individuals in order to create something just and harmonious and beautiful. And that's particularly relevant because, as we were discussing a little bit earlier before we began, it's really a place now where we're looking at the tower. These are tower times, as I think Byron Ballard originally posed a few years ago. And the hermit in the tower, in my opinion, needs to go right into community, create community, and we need to support each other, exchange wisdom, and grow through this together.
Yes, 100%. Those tower moments, those uncertain times require us to go within, right? We can't look to an external system or an external thing to support us. We have to go within. And in that process of going within, we can't become disconnected from those around us. And that's the trick, isn't it? How do I go within? How do I navigate the tower times, the uncertain times, and stay connected? Because it's that connection with other people is the thing that's going to help us all move forward.
Exactly.
I think that that's challenge for seekers, for practitioners, for change makers is okay, great. I want to deepen my wisdom and I want to be in community. And how do we do that? And we were talking about the hermit and the sun, actually, when we combine those two cards, how that can kind of give us a little bit more information
Mhm.
about how to navigate this.
I agree.
You want to talk a little bit about that relationship with the hermit and the sun?
Yes. Yes, and I'm gonna go through a journey. I think it's a journey. I don't think it's immediately the hermit wakes up and says, "Oh yeah, I need to be in community now." Bang. That's
No,
not how it works.
no.
It's a slow evolution, and I do believe the hermit needs to begin alone, looking inward. But there's a progression. So I'm going to borrow a progression that I've been working with the last few months, and that's the journey from the tower to the sun.
I love it.
So you already introduced this last episode with the wheel of fortune and change. So now, at this time when we speak, it's January 2025. This is, in fact, the first day of the Chinese New Year, the year of the snake, which is all about change and transformation. And we are transforming on a national level and a global level at an accelerated rate. I think it's not too much to say that many of us are disoriented, deeply uncertain. So your work with uncertainty is very timely. And we just don't know what's going to happen. But at every level, national, for many states, at the state level, and at the local level, it's the tower. We're deeply uncertain. So, what does the hermit do in tower times to make that journey towards the sun? I think the first thing the hermit does is look to the next card after the tower, which is the star. Because once the tower comes down, it clears the way for things that aren't sustainable. It clears away what won't work as it stands. And then in the rubble, in the new spaces that are created, the first thing you do is you look to spirit, to God, to the divine, however you call it. whatever your word for that force of divine spark that guides us, you look to the star and you open up all your senses and you ask for guidance in whatever way works for you. And you look around for the star to answer, for the universe to answer you and say, this way, here's a tidbit, here's another step, come here, come here. So the hermit, in my view, first starts by walking out from the rubble or amongst the rubble by following the star in tarot, getting that inspiration. And that sort of leads them forward. We're really geeking here. And the next card is the moon. So where's the next stop? The moon is going into your subconscious, your unconscious, your intuition, which is going to feel familiar to the hermit because they've been doing that kind of work earlier, right? So you're going to take this external inspiration from spirit, look inside themselves. And the work of the moon is to discern real intuitive hits, which should be coming right now, from things you're afraid of and things that you long for and are projecting. So the work of the moon is I'm going to really pay attention to my dreams. I'm going to really pay attention to the little voice that just pops up. I'm really going to pay attention to someone sitting next to me on the subway that discusses a book I desperately need to read. And I'm going to go with my intuitions. When something says, no, turn here at this corner. And you're like, why? The place I need to go, I can get sooner if I cross the street. No, turn. Do the thing, have faith, and discerning those moments of true intuition from moments where you're hearing not with your ears, but with your fears. Oh my God.
I love that. Not with your ears, but with your fears. And when you're in tower times, when you're in uncertain times, there is fear. That's a normal human reaction. So it's not something we want to ignore, but we've really got to figure out like, okay, what am I choosing to lead by? What am I choosing to like? I've got this fear. It's telling me something. My anxiety management system is all fired up. And how do I tune into what I know to be true and find a nice balance to those?
Absolutely. You are right on with this.
Yeah. And the moon is such an interesting card. You know, I always think of it like, how do things look in the moonlight? It's not that it's dark. It's not that there's a lack of light. I mean, anyone with a full moon that shines in their bedroom window at night will tell you it's not a lack of light, but everything looks different in moonlight. And sometimes there are a little bit more shadows that come up. There are a little bit more uncertainty, a little more second guessing, but it's still illuminating something. It's still showing you something that you need to be seeing before you can step into the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you can step into full daylight. I always get this kind of water like quality too with the moon where you're like underneath the water and there's that distorted, like you can see things, but they're not quite the way you would see them if you were like above the waterline.
Right. Right.
And always that, like you said, the ears and the fears, there's that disorientation that happens with the moon, whether we want it to or not. But we are drawing on, I love how you brought up the star. We're drawing on the hope of the star, the light of the star to get to lead us through. And remember, that star happens at night. We don't see it in the day. There's a reason why it's the star and not, and not something else. It pulls us through. It's what we kind of draw from when we're in the moon before we go into the sun. And I think it's a necessary thing. Oh, times are crazy out there. I never want to bypass and say, just tune it out. And I feel like we sort of have to go through this in order to grow.
There are so many spirit workers that I'm working with who are saying that exact same thing. This is what we have to do in order to grow, not deny it, acknowledge, be there, work with our responses of disorientation and fear and sadness, work with those things and move through them. Move through them.
Yeah, and move through them. I wish it could be different. I can have that wish and know that it's not. You know?
Yes.
But here we are, and this is what we're working with. And I think understanding the key then is understanding what it is what we're working with so that we can embrace these things are normal. This is normal, not normal in what's happening, but our response to them, the panic, the fear. That's a normal response.
how do we keep navigating towards that? And like, so then the sun comes next, right? The
Yes,
sun. Yay.
exactly. Yes. We move into the sun and we take with us everything we've got. And everything includes the hope, the inspiration, everything we've learned in the Hermit, all our resources. And it also includes the fears, the disorientation, and the worry, along with some tools, hopefully, to management. We take all of that into the sun, into community, and we are all there with as whole beings with all parts of them. And in that space, clearly acknowledging what is true, what we love and what we wish weren't true, we begin helping each other move to a more transformative level of who we are. And we begin building harmonious community in ways that can, over a long arc of time, change the world.
And it is an arc of time. It's not going to be immediate. So how do people who are specifically the mission driven change makers, like I want to make a difference in this world, I see what's
Sure.
happening, I want it to be different for future generations, how do we balance that need for that individual reflection, that individual tug that the hermit gives us, and the growth that comes from that inwardness with the call to connect with others and to create something greater, which is the sun, essentially? How do we do that? How do we balance that?
So I have an answer, but I'm not sure everyone's going to like it.
That means it's a good answer.
Okay. So I really believe that there are a number of steps that we take. And I believe it begins solo with the hermit, moves through this process I've described, and ends up in the sun community. You start by listening inside yourself, listening for the voice of spirit, God, the divine, gods, whatever words you use. And for me, that often happens right when I wake up in the morning, that I will get messages, urges, phrases. We listen and we don't dismiss them. The
Mhm.
work of the hermit is to listen what emerges from within. And listening, often that will lead us to new things, often new practices. What do I mean by that? I mean practices of daily life who over time change who we are. A dear friend of mine taught me a saying: transformation only happens in action. April Thoreau, my co-host on Grounded Magic. And she's right. So you take that inspiration, you follow it, and it will often lead you to practices which could be as simple as 5 minutes of quiet breathing a day. Or, you know what? I'm feeling a lot of uncertainty. I'm going to just start writing that down in a private blog or in a private notebook. Or I feel so much better when I do 10 minutes of yoga. The practice doesn't have to be every single day, but it needs to become something consistent that's an anchor and a ground.
Mm.
Just engaging in that practice or practices, moving us forward and staying open to the messages will begin the transformation process. And here's where I think community and the sun balances it and comes in. It is super hard for most individuals to maintain a practice or a change without some form of the A word, accountability. And accountability happens with other humans and other allies, most of whom are human. In my opinion, a great way to do this balancing is you do the first steps yourself. You enter into, you identify your own mission, your own practices, and then you gather with others to affirm each other, to listen to each other, to share what we know, but also clearly and concretely to keep each other accountable for what you say you're going to do and what you're here to do in your particular calling, your mission. So that's my opinion, but it's often a little more work than people want to initially embrace.
It is more work, but it's needed. We need different points of view. We need different ways of seeing things. We need to understand how the world outside of ourselves is unfolding. And when we bring our introspections, our personal internal practice, like the hermit has us do, into a group situation, it can't help but evolve. We can't help but see the bigger picture. We can't help to have more ahas, more, oh my gosh, I'm connecting this. This makes sense. The way that you said this makes sense. The way that you said that makes sense. What you're moving through, I identify with. It makes sense. I understand that. I see that. And we have to have, like you said, that mirror of people around us to understand ourselves more fully. And yet, up until this point, mainstream spirituality has us moving away from the community aspect and into the go meditate, go be by yourself, figure
Yep,
out what you need, figure out
you're
what
right.
it's very I centric. Yes. And there needs to be more. We need to bring this community element back, especially, I think, when people have this idea of like, there's a spiritual guru, we're looking to this spiritual guru, they're going to have all the answers. No one has all the answers. Spoiler alert, no one has all the answers.
True that.
And you're attempting to do something different by bringing in people, practitioners, mission driven entrepreneurs. You're wanting to bring them together in
Mhm.
a focal point, which I think is really interesting, to expand how we're all thinking.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that? And what is your why? I'm fascinated by the
Oh,
why, people's whys. So,
sure.
what is your why? What's driving you there? Like, we know the hermit needs the sun needs the hermit, but why that expression of it?
I'm going to give a tiny bit of history and then I'm going to talk about the now because those are different.
Yep.
So, my background includes many decades of Wicca, my spiritual background, Wicca, the sort of syncretic Catholicism from my mom, Buddhist training, and a core shamanism training, all those things. But when I was younger, that was the time period when people who entered into some kind of magical training or spiritually magical practice were hit over the head in almost every book and in almost every situation with the phrase, it's all about your intentions. Your intentions are what really matter. Okay. I'm not going to say that there wasn't truth there. There
Mhm.
is. But having now spent over 40 years in spiritual and magical communities, I'm going to tell you right now that part of that's a lie. Okay.
It is. I think I know where this is going.
It's not just all about intention. Intention is important. Certainly, when you're developing magical practice, when you're doing your own transformative or magical work in the world, intention is really important. But if you want to sustain transformation, you need an accountability mechanism to do it. Intention without accountability and a structure. Okay, we're going to geek more here. Bring in the emperor because what's the upright emperor really good at the best?
Structure.
Yeah, positive structure. We're going to put that structure in. All those brilliant creative ideas you've got, all that inspiration. You can't do them all. If you try to do all 20, you're going to fall on your face. So I, the emperor, will give you the structure that says pick two and measure. So inspiration and intention have to be paired with accountability. And that is something I learned over and over as a university professor, as a writer, all of that. The book I wrote never would have come out without accountability. So I'm going to tell you that's the personal piece.
And can I say I agree with you? That's why I think it's important that when we talk about intentions, we talk about the idea of the practice of intentionality, the practice of, and I think you have to combine it with owning your impact.
Wow, I love that. Tell
Because
me
if,
more.
well, you can have the best of intentions, but it may impact in ways that you didn't understand or you
Okay.
didn't foresee. So we can have these intentions. And I think this is where the spiritual world struggles a little bit. We can have these intentions and we'll tie it back to the hermit in our solo practice. This is our intention. We can even have a practice of intentionality. And then we need to like think about that ripple out. How is this going to impact not just myself, but people around me?
Yeah.
And if it does impact in ways I didn't foresee, then how do I navigate that? And how do I work with that? Because when we go from that solo practice to the sun, all of a sudden there are other people we have to think about beyond ourselves. We have to
Right.
think about like, not are we just rippling out and how do I make this meditation so I find inner peace? How
Right.
do I make this whatever? But how does this impact those around me?
Absolutely.
You
Yep.
know? And I love that you brought the emperor into it because the emperor, when you flip it over, people are like, oh, the emperor. There's like a lot of meanings with the emperor.
And the
But
negative emperor is really scary and
it
very
is
toxic.
very
Yep.
toxic. It's just kind of classic toxic leader. But that structure is so important. There's a reason why it's included in the arcana is because we need that.
Mhm.
We need that structure. And so I love that you bring up that intentions it can't just be about intentions. We have to have something that we put our hands on, that we do, that we touch, that we bring into the world, that we make it come alive in real life. And
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah. So historically for me, my why is rooted in hell no, it's not just intentions. And just intentions doesn't lead to ongoing transformative action. It has to be accountability. So when I work with people, I'm here to bring in spirit. I'm doing deep dive readings with them, but I want to link it as quickly as possible to concrete actions and structure. And so when people work with me, it's 90 minutes or 2 hours. They get a transcript, they get a recording, and I give them homework. I give them homework. I think actually one of the reasons that almost like 90% of my practice now is change agents and spirit driven people is because I drove everybody away by assigning them homework.
I love homework.
Yeah. So that's one piece, but I have another why, and the why has to do with the star. I've known for a while, like I think many of us, that big change is coming. And I really feel, okay, I'm going to sound a little crazy woo here, and I'm going to own that. It is my personal belief that if you were born into this period now, particularly as someone with a kind of spiritual inclination or practice, however you identify, yogi, Buddhist, Wicca, magician, however, I think that if you came in now, you came in on purpose to do a job, that you have a job, that there's a team you're supposed to be on right now. And my team is educate and support people and empower them. But somebody else's team might be, I'm going to be involved in activism around this issue or that issue. Somebody else's team might be, I'm going to create safe spaces outside the United States for people who decide they want to leave temporarily or permanently. Or someone else might say, you know what? My mission, I came in here to work on women's health through a difficult time for women's health. Whatever. We need all the teams. All the teams are good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you and me and a whole bunch of people who identify as spiritual workers were literally born for these times. And here it is. And now we're going to do this work. So let's get up and create the containers in which we can empower each other, work together, and get her done.
Mm-hmm. And all of us have to be present to do that.
Yes.
Just one of us and that flavor of team isn't enough. We have to have everybody who has their little zone of genius, their pull, their tug, right? Coming in together and working as a collective cohesively.
Yes.
Because singularly, we can only get so far.
Correct. Correct.
You're reimagining what that coming together looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it fascinating because you're intentionally pulling people from different areas, different like regional, like actual physical areas.
Yes. Yes.
Which I
Yes.
love. Pulling them from different regions to come together to create and actually participate in kind of an experiment, I would call it. Because
Yes.
you're not really sure what this looks like, but you know that you have to do it, which I love. I think a lot of life is experimenting and staying curious and seeing what happens and then adjusting course when needed, right? And so you're having this experiment. You want to talk a little bit about like what is happening there and like
Yes, I
how
do.
it might work and unfold?
I do. But I also want to tell you, I can't really take credit for bringing together the people of different regions. The piece I did, the only piece I did was say, I'm here, I'm listening, tell me what to do. That's what I did. And starting in December, me and a whole heck of a lot of people, including you, as I listened to your episode, your last several episodes, got the message. There's going to be a lot of change and you need to prepare for that. And what I got was the phrase, you were born for these times. And Spirit literally introduced me to a number of people, including you, that helped me shape this experiment. And this is what the experiment looks like. 3 people were brought to me from different parts of the country, and the 4 of us are holding an online retreat. It's free because we don't want any barriers for people to come in. It's called From Tower to Sun. You were born for these times. We have a limited number of slots just because there's a limit to what we can handle technologically and in terms of our experience. But each person is inviting people from each region of the country to come. And we are combining our different expertises. For me, it's divination. For Michaela Daystar, she's a Reiki master, and it's embodiment, Reiki, self-care. For Kadi Twilight, it's astrology. She's bringing in her ability to teach about the astrology of 2025 and how people can align to it and how they can use their own charts for maximizing their transformational potential. And it's Beverly Evans, who was active in the first wave of feminism and who spent her life doing work on equality for women and men, and who's a therapist. And she's going to help people really acknowledge, listen to, sit with, and work through their feelings of disorientation and fear and pain. It's a 2-day online retreat. You were born for these times, and I've given you the link for it. And we don't know what's going to happen. We're very different facilitators. We each have different and complementary skills. And we've worked out a structure. We've created a structure complete with a model, a map, tools to help people, and a community within which to start out and flourish. We are providing all of these things, including, I was very insistent on, offering people assistance to organize their own accountability groups. If there's not a concrete application of a piece of magic and accountability, I don't want anything to do with it.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm always like, all right, what action are you going to take now? What are you going to do?
Exactly.
How are you going to make
Exactly.
this go further? You were born for these times. That is like a perception shift that I love, like a perspective that just rather than, oh my God, we're in these times, you were born for this, like the
Yes.
purpose behind that.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the thing that carries us through. That's almost like the star embodied. You were born for these times. How can you be a light for someone else?
Right.
Right? If you
Right.
intentionally chose to be here at this time, and I do believe that there are moments where there are these waves that come, waves of people, because we've made choices, y'all. We've made choices. I've talked about this before. When you make a choice, the energy has to play out. We have been making choices for thousands and thousands of years, and the energy is playing out in this moment. And so
Yes.
if we're looking at it on an energetic level, if we're looking at it on a woo level, which I'm okay with doing, we knew this was coming. We knew this was coming, or it was very likely. If it wasn't set in stone, it was very likely because of all the choices we've made from all of the thousands of years have led to this moment, and that energy has to play out. I think that we need to be starting to plant the seed of a different way forward. We need to be making different choices, different now, because then that energy will be the thing that plays out. And we cannot do that alone. We cannot do that alone. We have to get that momentum, to get that movement forward. We have to do it together.
Okay, what you just said, those last 3 sentences, for me, encapsulates exactly why we're here, what we're doing, and what these times and spirit asks of us right there.
And you know what I think is the hardest part about that? We may not be alive in this body to see our work come to fruition. It's like the ultimate,
Yes.
like the
Yes.
ultimate, I believe.
Yes. Yes. I think you're right. I've been listening to a Buddhist teacher, Norma Wong, who is an activist and teacher in Hawaii. Another lovely podcast that she was on, she was interviewed. I wish I could remember the name of the podcast. It's really great. It's about, I think it's called Surviving the End of the World or something like that. And she's indigenous, and she said, "Look, I only do work now that is sprung from an indigenous core, and every human being walking this earth, whatever, however they identify, they came from indigenous people at one time. Everyone.
Yes.
And the arc of time in indigenous cultures is different. Thinking 100 years ahead, 150 years ahead, 7 generations,
Yeah.
and looking backward to the horizon, saying, okay, I come from generations of people. So in those cultures, when you think about change, you think in terms of generations. And she said, I only work in a 100-year arc or more. And that's what I've adopted. And that's kind of what I was told years ago when I was working with the Griffin's Grove School of Shamanism with Carolyn Kenner. I had a number of visions. And one was the one that really said, you and so many other people were born for these times. Each of you is going to do very specific individual work. You can't tell each other what that is. You can put people in a structure where they discover it for themselves, which is what we're going to try to do with our retreat. We're not going to try to tell them, but it's this that's really critical. And know this, you will not see the fruit of your work fully or even in its majority for 3 generations, which means I won't live to see it. And that's okay. I'll see the beginnings. I'll see the sprouts. And I'm going to think in a 100-year arc, and I'm going to do my work with confidence because I really eat my own cooking. And when spirit says do the thing, it's going to take 100 years. Okay, let's go. You put your finger right on it, Jessica, right on it.
We have to start sometime. We have to start sometime.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the way that we keep hope.
Yes.
Because it can be really discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why we need community, because we need that discouragement will get passed around, right? Somebody else in that will have hope. My husband did search and rescue and survival training when he was working. And he had talked about this idea of when people are in the water, if they find themselves in the water, they create a circle and they take turns kicking because at some point someone will get tired, but the others will keep the one who's tired afloat. And they all alternate so that no one goes under, holding hands connected in a circle so that no one goes under. And that gives that person a moment to, like, if they're discouraged, if they're whatever, they get a moment of respite and then they come back in because they're going to support the person who then across the circle maybe can't kick anymore, can't stay above water. But together, they all stay above water. If they were to separate and let go, they would all go under. And I think that that's kind of this idea of what community is it's not optional. People have known that it's not optional, but history, we could go on that. I could go off on a tangent on that. It has become something that is optional. Now we're moving into this is not optional. We have to do this together. We have to. We're not just connected energetically to source or unity or the one. We are here to bring that connectedness to earth, to see it in physical form, to touch it, to whatever. It is not optional. We have tried the optional community thing and it has got us here. Here's not great, y'all. If you looked out your window recently, there are beautiful things about here. And then there are things that are painful and unsustainable happening in the world.
I think you've nailed it.
Yeah. I just think we have to make a choice to come together. If we have the luxury of coming together, if we have that space, if we as leaders can go out there and start that will ripple out. Not everyone has that right now. I understand that. Like there are people out there that don't have the luxury of coming together for various reasons. But I think if you do, then I think that's the gift that you bring to the world. Community. Being part of it, being connected to it, creating it, helping people thrive within it. We've got to do that. I don't see another way forward.
I'm so curious because I think there are going to be all kinds of innovative ways that we begin doing it. And I'm so curious. I want to see what that's going to look like.
I know. I hope it happens before my 100 years is up. I would love to see or at least get a glimpse of what that looks like, because I don't think there's one way. I think it's like a giant reimagining, and I can't wait to see what comes from it.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And it feels good to know, even if you don't know at this moment exactly what you're doing here, or maybe you know some of it, but you don't know the full scope. I really think if you make your way into some form of community, somewhere with a structure that helps you work through to figure it out, you're going to be so much better. You're going to be so much better, and it's going to feel so much better. And you're going to get to do what you came here for.
And you'll get the ability to not have to kick constantly to keep
I
yourself
love that
above water.
story. Yes. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he told me that years and years ago. It's always stuck with me. I think it's such an apt metaphor for this moment, right? We're in the ocean. We can't see the boat. We don't know who's coming. We're going to have to save ourselves. We
Yeah.
have to save ourselves. And the only way we're going to save ourselves is together.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I wonder if maybe some of the function of all the chaos we're seeing, just as you said earlier, isn't to force us to make the next leap in evolution, which is together.
Mm-hmm. It's together. Oh, I wish we could do it differently. Don't you wish sometimes we could just flow and it was like we'd made different choices and this wasn't it, but this is it. This is what we're working with.
Mhm.
And that's why I think, like you said, we were born for these times to make it like, let's do this. So when is your event? When is it happening?
It's February 8th and 9th. There is a link. We have a limited number of spots. Some of them have been taken, but I'm just going to work with the assumption, all four of us, that the people who need to be there will be there. And the people who maybe can only be there part of the time, there is an option if you want to buy recordings and materials, because each of the presentations is going to come with materials and do it yourself. You can do that. That is an option, but we want it to be available to everybody regardless. There's a limited number of spots. Many are filled, but we still have some openings. And I just figure the people who need to be there or who need to get the record, the recordings they can work with, will come. I trust in that. We start late in the day. It's going to include people from all over the country, people from the West, the Pacific time zone, people from the mountain and central time zones, people from the East. So if you're on the East Coast, it starts kind of late, 1 o'clock, and it goes into the evening. But that makes it possible for people in Pacific and Mountain to come too. So it's going to be really diverse in terms of geography, which is something that tends not to happen. We tend to kind of cluster regionally. So we're trying to get past that. And it's going to basically offer a structured path through our map, giving people tools so they can go through a process, a moment to allow spirit to tell them what's going to happen. The work I do, guided divination, influenced by you, by the way. I learned from you in our conversation so that they can figure out what they're being told through divination, to get the astrological picture from Kadi, to get so much information about self-care, being good to themselves, using energy and visioning from Michaela. And really critical, as you have talked about so beautifully here, how to work with our emotions without denying them. And that's what Beverly's going to bring. So we're going to move people through this 2-day process. And then we're going to offer, for people who want it, accountability options. Again, nothing they have to pay for, because, this is us. There's going to be homework and they're going to have to do a lot of the work themselves. We're not telling you what to do. You're telling yourself, and then we'll just give you the tools to put in place what you need to do to sustain it. So this is our grand experiment. We'll see what happens. I'm really curious.
I can't wait. You'll have to come back on like with an update
Okay.
and tell us like how it flowed. I can't wait. I love this experiment. I think there is so much potential here and I can't wait to hear what happens. If folks can't make it to the event, how can they be in touch with you?
Right.
How can they reach you?
People can reach me at info@sabrinamariechase.com, info@sabrinamariechase.com. If they have questions, they can follow the link, which I believe I
Yeah.
sent you.
Yep, I'll put
And
it in the show notes.
if they know they want to do this, but they're not available on those days, they can pay $25 and get recordings and probably more materials than they will ever want to see, along with some homework assignments, most likely, in order to do that work. And they will also have access to my expertise. They'll be able to email me and ask me questions, and I will answer. I'm really committed to this. I will answer everyone. I will try to help everybody in whatever little way I can, or point them towards some other resource or person if I can. There are options in terms of how to do this. But if you can come partly in person or totally in person, you can just go sign up for free and then just show up. And we're going to have a lot of small group work. So, okay, I should probably put this out here so people know because there are extroverts and there are introverts. Almost all the workshop kind of work that I do and that many of my colleagues do involves one-on-one or small group interactions. So as a part of this process, you're going to be put in small groups to work immediately on the structures you're given. And you're going to meet people and they're going to be maybe from 2 time zones away from you. And that's going to happen multiple times. So this is our way, not only to help people process, but also to sneak in a little bit like, just by showing up, we're going to create community and you can choose to follow up on that or not as you decide.
I love that. Anytime we can do that interconnectedness, it's like this beautiful energetic spider web.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of it. Sometimes it's uncertain because we see the whole world happening and it's so loud and there's so much noise and we're connected to everything now. We're not just our own little things. The magic lies in that we can connect in a way that we've never connected before.
Yeah.
I love that. I think the small groups are a great idea. I love that. Well, I can't wait.
Thank
I
you.
can't wait.
I'm excited too. I'm happy to come back and tell you what happens, what works and what doesn't. The things we never expected, those are almost always the best things. The things
Those
that
are the best things.
where you're
I would
like,
say,
wait, what?
You have to just add a human in order to really see how it's all going to work. So I can't wait for you. Thank you so much for taking time and being on today. I appreciate it.
It was a joy. Anytime I can talk to you, especially anytime I can talk to you about tarot. Yeah, I'm interested. Thank you so much.
We'll have to do this again. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Feel free to share your thoughts. Find us on social media, send us an email, let us know what you think, and don't forget to leave a review. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to Reclaiming Our Spirit. To find out how I can help you reclaim your spirit, reach out to me at www.jessicapashke.com. Leave me a message and I just may share how you reclaimed your spirit in the next episode.